Right now, the streets are a bloodbath. And statistically speaking, there's about 30 kids in here. 10 of you are going to be dead before your next birthday.
Got a couple of tips. Help you guys stay out of jail. 1, try your hardest to not be black or Hispanic.
It's a good tip.
Gentlemen, we got a hop when Hoyt and Gamble have Urshan hostage. High-speed car chase in progress.
Yes. Gun! Gun! Pass up the guns. Pass them up. Let's go, people. Here we go. Anything? Any tasers? No? Who wants to go on a ride along? Huh? All right, you, sweetie. Come on. Let's go. Move! Move! Let's go! Come on!
Hello, everyone. All my life's work, really, I see, has been driven by an inexpressible need for a friend who would understand and soothe me. And all those years of work have come to fruition with Bash Life. Our new Bash 14.3 phone is fully integrated into your every feeling and desire.
This will cheer you up, Peter.
You are my best friend. You are my best friend. And you're really like you.
There's nothing like entertainment that's both hilarious and profound. Comedic pieces that work through and reframe the often difficult or overlooked topics of history or our current day, dropping harsh truth through the lens of humor. It's why satire and comedy have had such a strong marriage throughout the centuries. The genre entertains people through cathartic laughs, but once they settle, leaves them with something to think about. Even if it evokes a simple reaction of, oh, that's f***ed up, or that's relatable, it often does so while confronting the controversial or challenging, giving us further insight into the inner workings or misgivings of those around us. The opening clips I showed earlier are from 2 separate movies that attempt to do just this, both written and directed by Oscar darling Adam McKay. Though I would argue that beyond its jokes, this one segment clearly drives home a deeper message on the troubling, though overlooked issues of cop violence in America, while this one stumbles to really highlight anything new or insightful about its subject matter at all. I mean, sure, we can probably glean from its unappealing, bumbling portrayal of a wealthy tech billionaire that the director doesn't have much respect and likely has some deep-seated contempt for the Jeff Bezoses of the world, which, you know, fair, but that's where it ends, really? Because as awkward and detached and almost sci-fi villain-esque Zuckerberg, Musk, and Bezos tend to be, they're quite articulate, and sometimes even, dare I say, charismatic in their own strange way. None of them really act like this. The commentary doesn't really lampoon the actual personas of these industry bigwigs, it instead opts for the playground-level insult of simply making them look generically silly or ridiculous, and in doing so, fails to say much at all. And sure, generically silly parodies can be funny, but on top of shallow satire, they also personally didn't play up the ridiculousness enough for it to enter the realm of absurdist comedy. The humor felt pretty held back, making for a pretty flat caricature. And sadly, this felt like a recurring experience for the rest of the film, the most recent addition to McKay's comedic filmography, Don't Look Up. Comedy is, of course, subjective, so whatever I've got to say on this movie's jokes from here on out ultimately hinges on my personal sense of humor, but being a film that tries to comment on pressing socio-environmental issues, it could have at least attempted to offer some new ideas or revelations to think about beyond mere, albeit justified, anger at current issues. And at least for me, this film succeeded in neither of these areas, feeling both like a lukewarm case for comedy and satirical commentary. And because I've got a lot of thoughts, having gone into this film with high hopes, that's what we'll be digging into for this video.
We've been trying to tell you! We've been trying to tell you this whole time! It's right there! There it is!
Couldn't get a wig in time to match the color of J-Laws in the movie, so just pretend this is orange. Anyway, I want to start off by saying that I'm actually a huge fan of Adam McKay's work because of his comedic satire. In my opinion, his previous projects have shown that he's got quite the talent for it. You've got Anchorman and its commentary of misogyny in media, Talladega Nights and its parody of NASCAR culture and the American Dream, and one of my personal favorite comedies of all time, The Other Guys, a buddy cop parody of US police culture and Wall Street corruption. If somehow you've missed out on watching this hilariously ridiculous film, please do. Mark Wahlberg deserved an award for his facial reactions alone. So come 2021, with McKay's latest release of the now Netflix hit and Academy Award nominee, Don't Look Up, what happened? It's no secret that the dude wanted this movie to be a blunt allegory for climate change and our failures to act as a society. We follow two scientists, Kate Dibiasky and Randall Mindy, played respectively by Jennifer Lawrence and Leonardo DiCaprio, who attempt to persuade the public into urgent action as a giant, planet-killing meteor hurtles its way towards Earth. Sadly, from social media users to news anchors to the literal President of the United States, no one just seems to listen. And on paper, it seems like it'd make for a really entertaining premise. And what subject matter more topical, more ripe for substantial commentary than the growing climate crisis? Sadly, if there's one word I'd use to describe this attempt at satire, it'd be surface level. From its critiques to the comedy, it just felt like a mere vehicle for outrage with no real insight. And I guess they still could have made this work if said moments of angry commentary weren't so on the nose and shoved down your throat. One of these being an entire sequence of Leonardo DiCaprio screaming the film sentiments right through our screens.
Times we need to just be able to say things to one another. We need to hear things. There is a huge comet headed towards Earth. I mean, for God's sakes, we took a f***ing picture of it. What other proof do we need? And if we can't all agree at the bare minimum that a giant comet the size of Mount Everest hurtling its way towards planet Earth is not a f***ing good thing, then what the hell happened to us? We should have deflected this comet when we had the f***ing chance, but we didn't do it. I don't know why we didn't do it. I think we're all gonna die!
Effective and needed in the world of the characters, yes, but not so much for the audiences looking to watch a more thoughtful, topical film. And I want to lay that down because it seems like the very polarizing discourse surrounding this movie is filled with the same jab of, oh, you're just like the comet deniers who didn't look up, if you dare criticize this kind of hacky script writing. But, and I don't think this should be a hot take, just because a film's message is good doesn't automatically make it a good film. And I will establish now, before I get accusations thrown my way, I do believe that climate change is one of the most pressing issues the world is facing right now, and government should step it up. I'm on this movie's side. But with that said, I believe the most effective satirical comedies provide a new or deeper understanding of their subject matter, especially if it's an important one. They inspire new ideas, they make you think and allow you to come to its intended conclusions on your own. And I think it's these sorts of pieces that help change minds or allow for an understanding of new concepts, something comedy has constantly been praised for its ability to do over the years. Think back to this example I pulled up from The Other Guys. These two cops schooling grade schoolers by telling half of them they're dead already to a broken justice system makes for a darkly bizarre, hilarious scene. But McKay leverages this played-up silliness to spotlight and critique the negligence of American law enforcement. Similarly, for the rest of the film, he amplifies the ridiculousness of typical cop buddy films to highlight how some of the most insidious crimes are often not on the streets, but behind closed penthouse doors, a subversion of both the genre and the types of crime often sensationalized in media, but I'll get more into this later on in the video. Sadly, McKay's latest film lacked the clever form of execution, wit, or subtlety that you'd, or at least I, would expect in an effective, compelling comedic satire. Nor did it offer us anything new to think about. It really just felt like it simply served to reinforce the bleak state of our world without offering solutions, a semblance of hope, or even just a fresh perspective. Which makes me wonder, who exactly was this movie for? Many of those who already agree with its skin-deep takes will likely yearn for something more substantial, and those on the other side of the fence are likely not going to change their minds from its obnoxiously on-the-nose messaging. But above all else, perhaps its biggest flub is, despite all this, its comedy was also really toothlessly lame. Quality comedic satire often achieves biting, humorous critique by either doubling down on creatively absurd, hyperbolic caricatures of its subjects, think South Park or Adam McKay's previously mentioned films, or more realistic, grounded depictions that make use of drier forms of comedic commentary, like cringe humor. Think The British Office or This Is Spinal Tap. And save for a few scenes that I will mention later, Don't Look Up doesn't really excel in either. It kind of stays in this strange, uncanny valley middle where its parodies feel too shallow to be meaningful satire, nor are they exaggerated enough to feel like silly absurdist spoofs, making it feel just as biting and clever as a bad SNL skit. And it is a shame because we know that Adam McKay is capable of so much better. In fact, he's currently an executive producer on HBO's Succession, one of the best written satirical dark comedies of recent years, a series that, despite sharing plenty of similarities with Don't Look Up in terms of its characters and its themes of power in media, does a far stellar job at getting its intended messaging across, and it's also arguably a lot funnier.
Dude, are you carrying dog shit?
No, it's, my body is growing weak due to a lack of sustenance.
But in a dog poop baggie?
Yeah, I have a bunch of them from back home.
That's disgusting.
It's like, it's not like they pre-poop them or something, like, it's not like, they're just bags, really. It's just a mental barrier.
So for this video, I thought I'd break down where I thought McKay struck and missed for a film with so much potential, and hopefully this could shine light on why many like me aren't as taken with this movie, or find it painfully unfunny. But before we dive into that, here's a quick word from our sponsor. This video was brought to you by Established Titles. I was initially going to perform this entire segment in a Disney princess voice, but thought I'd spare you all. So did you guys know that apart from being a cosplayer and a wannabe video essayist, I am also an official lady in Scotland? That's right. So Established Titles is a unique little project that allows you to buy as little as a square foot of dedicated Scottish land, and following a historic custom allows you to officially be referred to as a lord or lady. And if that concept isn't cool enough, on top of a digital certificate officiating your title, you can also get it in physical writing through a fancy framed certificate. So I'm gonna do a little bit of a spontaneous unboxing segment right here because I actually haven't opened mine up yet, so let's check it out. I'm not breaking anything by like forcing this open, but yeah, I don't want to get up and get my scissors. Okay, ignore that. But check it out. This is how they package it. Ooh, okay, so it comes with it even comes with a little letter, just thanking you for your patronage. There it is! Okay, let's, I don't know why I showed it to you in bubble wrap form, but look at how official that looks. Look at how fancy that looks. Lady Anna Isabel. Look at that. A literal milady. And with your certificate comes a unique plot number that you can use to actually look up the exact location of your land. And there's mine right there. It makes for a pretty novel last-minute gift, and on their website you can choose from either a lordship, ladyship, or even couples title pack that allows you to purchase adjoining plots of land. But you aren't just a lord or lady or laird in this piece of document here. You can also use your new title to change your name on plane tickets, your credit card, or even your dating profiles. Though I think the best part about all of this is that Established Titles has partnered with global charities One Tree Planted and Trees for the Future to plant a tree with every order, helping support global reforestation efforts and preserve the beautiful woodlands and biodiversity of Scotland. So above all else, it's for a pretty good cause. Now, Established Titles is currently running a huge sale, and with my code Anna Isabel, you can get an even further 10% off your purchase. Just head on over to establishedtitles.com/Anna Isabel to make you or a loved one a lord or lady or laird today. Link up here or in the description. Perhaps the biggest crack in this movie's attempted satire is the fact that the comet isn't the greatest metaphor for commentary on the climate crisis. And look, I've seen a lot of people claim that the film is less about climate change and more about general societal ignorance and our inability to communicate. Some have also stated that it's also better looked at as an allegory for the recent pandemic. But in breaking this movie down, we're gonna have to go with the director's actual intentions for the film, which, as he has bluntly said himself, was meant to represent our current climate crisis.
So this movie came from my burgeoning terror about the climate crisis. And so I was talking to a buddy of mine who's a journalist, David Sirota, and we were both just like, can you believe that this isn't being covered in the media? It's being pushed to the end of the story. There's no headlines. And Sirota just offhandedly said, it's like a comet's headed to Earth and it's going to destroy us all and no one cares. And I just was like, that's the idea.
All character arcs and storytelling decisions in this film were ultimately intended to be viewed in this specific context, and in this sense, its writing fell kind of flat. First off is how the film tackles climate denial, or in this case, comet denial. The fact that the movie lacks a strong metaphorical link to the fossil fuel industry, the most significant enemy of proactive climate action, already starts its satire off on a weak foot. History has shown that major oil companies have acknowledged and actually are aware of the dangers of their product, but through our increasing and expanding reliance on fossil fuels for industrialization, have funded think tanks, political parties, and even contrarian scientists to cast doubt on climate change evidence and obstruct climate action. Certain politicians in this group may thus appear to oppose or dismiss the science while secretly believing in it.
These are people who've got essentially a political gun to their heads. Right. They're being told, you do this and it's a career ender.
According to previous climate skeptic Jerry Taylor, it was hard to convert anyone in his circle out of their mindset since
it's awful difficult to convince somebody of an idea that would cost them their jobs were they to embrace it.
There is a lot of insidious corruption to pick apart in the field of climate denialism, though McKay opts for a really simplistic representation of this in his film, reducing the side of the crisis to people simply not listening or not getting it. And sure, there are people in real life who are like this, who add to ongoing climate problems through mere ignorance, but McKay doesn't attempt to explore beyond the surface, or give further insight into a problem beyond what your average doomer already sees day to day. That might have been the point, but aside from a really superficial take, it didn't really offer any interesting punchlines beyond people just being oblivious. And being a constant gag they'd rely on, it grew ever more boring, finger-wagging, and stale, having about the same punch as a guy yelling, "Wake up, sheeple," into a megaphone. And you may be thinking, but the president and the movie's cringeworthy caricature of billionaire tech moguls attempted to mine the comet for minerals. That was the film's intended metaphor for the fossil fuel industry. But as Keaton Joshi of The Guardian points out, it's not like the dude's piloting the comet around for profit. In an alternate ending where, say, they were able to successfully take apart and mine resources from the meteor, spoilers they didn't, and the entire planet was ultimately destroyed, then they would ultimately be wealthier, but nothing environmentally would have changed. In contrast to fossil fuels, they're being kept afloat by the elite for profit and are constantly destroying the planet no matter how wealthy we get. That said, I will say its representation of capitalist greed was at least pretty well done. It was also cool how they touched on real-life concerns surrounding unproven technologies in the climate discourse, which is a real issue that often distracts from the more effective, renewable, and scientifically approved alternatives. So, you know, kudos, credit where it's due. And despite the fact that their repetitive gag of everyone's an idiot except me wore thin and ever more uninteresting as the film went on, I did enjoy their eventual sequence of fanatical impact deniers, a group of citizens so ridiculously stupid as to not simply look up and see the blatant truth staring at them in the face. And yes, this is an incredibly black and white way of viewing climate change denialism, since acknowledging the impacts of the crisis isn't as simple as looking up to the sky for evidence. And yes, this does present a plot hole once you realize, hey, wait, you're telling me none of them did the simple action of just looking up, even out of morbid curiosity? Because the joke could have ended there, but they actually followed it up later on, and one of those clowns looked up and realized they were all obviously being lied to. You're telling me that's the first time you looked up in days?
Lied to us.
What's up with that? And yeah, there's that too, but I can at least say that there was an attempt here at more creative humor. Like I said, certain comedic satires thrive on hyperbole, on highly exaggerated portrayals that are obviously untrue, but manage to offer insight into a subject matter regardless. I mentioned that South Park is a prime example of entertainment that excels in this, whether it's to comment on the chaos of Black Friday through a parody of Game of Thrones, or the circus of the political system by having a literal douche and turd sandwich duke it out. It is the absurdity of Don't Look Up's depiction of a movement so in denial they refuse to do something as simple as look up at the sky, fueled by a ridiculously silly presidential speech mirroring real-life politicians who do nothing but spew empty platitudes. That, in my opinion, packs this caricature some comedic punch. Sadly, I can't say the same for the rest of the movie's comic attempts, one of course being their attempted portrayal of today's tech mogul billionaires. And before I go on about how I cringe through each and every moment of Mark Rylance's on-screen presence, I do want to acknowledge a theory running around that this character may be someone with autism. And if that's the case, isn't it kind of distasteful to make him out to be as creepy and despicable as possible? Don't we already have enough negative representations of neurodivergent people in media? Isn't that kind of a gross stereotype to reinforce? So giving Adam McKay the benefit of the doubt here, I have to assume this was just his darndest attempt at making a funny, evil, rich guy. Except his parody of these kinds of people simply boiled down to him just acting like the most vapid caricature of a stupid person. What is the commentary here? He's just an infant in the body of a middle-aged man. Except he's not boisterous or over the top enough for it to be silly funny, and he isn't a particularly witty take on the actual personalities of today's billionaires. He's just an empty, lazy running gag. Towards the end of the film, we are then treated to a song exclusively written for the movie, performed by Ariana Grande, who plays a pop star parody version of herself. And again, this could have been an opportunity for a few good punchlines in the form of catchy, clever lyrics. They could have gone the Lonely Island or Bo Burnham route. And who knows, maybe they tried. But these lines were the best we got.
Listen to the goddamn qualified scientists who really fucked it up this time. And you can act like everything is alright, but this is probably happening in real time. From all of the shadows and news, show about the dust on everybody.
You know, cool, I agree, but I don't know, maybe it would have been nice to have a joke other than the one you've used 10 other times throughout this movie.
100% for sure gonna die! You're gonna die! You're gonna die! Tell me we're all gonna die. That we're all gonna die.
I think his whole administration has completely lost their f***ing mind! And I think we're all gonna die!
So we're about to die soon, everybody!
Do you get it yet? It also seems embarrassingly out of touch with the modern trends it attempts to parody. Yes, truly the quintessential meme if it were 2010.
Is that even allowed on the internet?
Yo, I'm sorry, have you been online? And yeah, I'm sure Kate's name in a headline like that would bode well in a post-#MeToo era. And if I really wanted to pick apart the climate change metaphor, its impacts definitely won't be felt equally around the world like a comet. In fact, those who have contributed less to the crisis are currently the most vulnerable. Disadvantaged low-income communities and populations will be hit the hardest and are currently bearing the brunt of rising sea levels and increasingly deadly weather events. It ain't a one problem kills all situation. Plus, climate solutions would also need to be a worldwide thing, and it's odd the film barely touches on other countries or gives them agency, save for a line and a few seconds of shots here and there. It's very much an American film focused on America, but for a movie attempting to touch on worldly issues, it kind of fails to account for the rest of the world. In summing all this up, I just feel like Adam McKay bit off more than he could chew here. It's clear that he's passionate about matters of the climate crisis, and particularly concerned about the lack of action among those with wealth, influence, and power. But for an issue so complex, so globally inclusive, so filled with sinister connivances and corruption, his potentially biting critique did nothing but merely scratch the surface. I really doubt he inspired any new ideas on the current climate crisis, even among those who already agree. I mean, in my experience, he definitely didn't encourage any more concern or awareness for it than I already had. And while at this point you may be thinking that I'm taking the whole movie a bit too seriously, even though it's trying to be an important film, you may be thinking that it's meant to be hyperbolic or cartoony, as satires often are, to make a point. But again, I personally don't think they went far enough in that department to be entertaining as that kind of movie. Their caricatures felt really one-note and repetitive, and as a result, really boring in my opinion as the film went on. And you may have enjoyed these jokes, there's nothing wrong with that. Again, we all find different things funny. So the film, at the very least, could have provided something objectively meatier with their commentary, which, as I've argued, they don't really do. As I've said earlier, it's all kind of disappointing when you realize Adam McKay is quite great in this genre otherwise, at least for me. I want to dig into HBO Succession for a minute, since I mentioned that McKay is currently an executive producer on the show. It's also a dark comedy that approaches similar themes to Don't Look Up, though does so with the depth and cleverness that the latter stumbles to achieve. The series is like Arrested Development meets Game of Thrones meets The Office, as we follow the lives of the ridiculously wealthy and dysfunctional dysfunctional family known as the Roys, owners of a global media conglomerate known as Waystar Royco, a spoof of the real-life American corporation Fox News. And off the bat, we're told its story through the eyes of some pretty questionable people. The Roys aren't lovable, heroic leads, they're constantly high on their quest for power and control while living a nauseatingly lavish lifestyle. And it doesn't take much to notice the clear spoof of the Murdochs here. There have actually been countless articles highlighting the actual people that Logan Roy and his children were likely based off of. And sure, you'd probably have certain characters among our lead cast that you'd root for more than others, but as a whole, these guys represent the rotten forces that fester and corrupt modern American media and politics. We watch as characters treat those who they perceive as lesser than with cruel intent or dismissal. Those who start off with earnest intentions will find themselves falter to the temptations of wealth or influence. Those who portray key, influential figures will blatantly lie or twist the truth if it means keeping their seat at the top or their image intact, or embrace important matters only if they can profit from them. And in this way, the series gives us quite a few thematic parallels to Don't Look Up, despite telling a completely different story altogether, topped with a similar attempt of satirizing these very real socio-political issues through a comedically bleak, sardonic lens. And yet, while I've argued the former struck and missed, Succession's takes leave quite the memorable impact. Armstrong's decision to place antagonistic characters at the forefront, to have us follow the story in their shoes, gives the show an opportunity to fully delve into the inner workings of how this side of society thinks and behaves. They portray figures like the Roys with insightful depth without necessarily encouraging us to take their side, since these kinds of people, questionable as their values are still three-dimensional humans at the end of the day, which often make their decisions all the more troubling and sinister. From silencing company victims to backing fascist presidential candidates, the show holds up a mirror to similar people and their choices in the real world, though takes us through the hows and whys of their decisions, granting us a closer and more substantially critical look into their morally corrupt characters and environments. You're left horrified by how the show shines light on the obscene opulence and power of the societal elite, and how their influence corrupts the system, without it outrightly telling you to be. It's more show than tell. And its decision to go with a more subtle, office-type cringe humor, the creator did Helm Peep Show after all, allows the characters to flub in more realistic and sometimes mortifying ways, which, at least to me, is far more cathartic and funny to watch than simply jeering at the one-dimensional stupidity of Don't Look Up's characters. It also helps that the writers have a much better understanding of the modern trends it attempts to portray, helping certain jabs land better. Their scenes of company PR platitudes, Kendall Roy's viscerally cringy attempts at sounding like a hip businessman, and corporate progressive pandering come to mind. And so you may be thinking, well, Don't Look Up wasn't meant to be as serious or as dramatic or as subtle in its humor as Succession. Plus, the fact that the latter's a series gives you more time to critically dig into these characters and understand their motivations. So let's take a look at another feature film, also directed by McKay, that leans into the silly or absurdist side of satire, while offering more substantial commentary on relevant issues. 2010's The Other Guys may, at first glance, seem like your average buddy cop spoof, though amidst its bizarre jokes and ridiculous antics, it poses a thought-provoking critique of the financial and justice system of America. McKay himself stated in a 2020 interview with Little White Lies that he was trying to make the entire movie an allegory for the financial crisis. And through over-the-top goofy characters, action sequences, and cartoonishly surreal comedic moments, the film brings us an almost South Park-esque level of entertainment while unraveling the complex symbiotic relationship between the police, the government, and white-collar crime. Through a clear parody of the Bernie Madoff scandal, McKay touches on the many moving parts that plague the financial system, the wasting of police resources on low-level crimes.
Yeah, detectives Vic Grayson, New York Observer, online. These suspects were caught with only a quarter pound of marijuana, a misdemeanor in some states. Do you think this arrest was worth $12 million in property damages?
Why don't we let New York City answer that question? The greatest city on earth, yeah!
The corrupt connections between big banks, law enforcement, and political figures that allow financial issues or even crimes to fester, and how the boring, behind-the-curtain nature of white-collar crimes invokes apathy among your everyday citizen, which, through the guise of a poppy, action-packed summer movie, McKay creatively attempts to break through. It's a movie that cleverly subverts your typical cop movie cliches, and, similarly to Succession, critiques a blind spot in society by taking us through the inner workings of it. In contrast to Don't Look Up's allegory for climate change, The Other Guys' allegory for the financial crisis shines an exposing light on the sides of an issue that are likely unfamiliar to your average viewer. McKay also expresses outrage through the subject matter for sure, but he does so with an almost educational substance, rather than his latest film, which is more about expressing outrage than anything, which, like I said, is fair, but its thin critiques likely won't give any more insight into the climate crisis and societal ignorance than your average layman. Plus, the fact that McKay goes balls to the wall absurd with his comedy in The Other Guys at least makes his commentary a lot more interesting, if not entertaining for everyone. Don't Look Up teeters the line between silly and serious, but it's no The Other Guys or Anchorman or Talladega Nights, which were also done by McKay, nor is it Succession with its biting social commentary, so it kind of stays in this weird, boring limbo where it excels in neither. At the end of it all, I was left feeling both uninspired and unentertained. And as an evidently divisive film, it seems like plenty others, while not necessarily disagreeing with its ideas, felt similarly one way or another. So once again, if anything, I hope this all at least sheds some light as to why. But before I wrap up this little review/analysis, I thought I'd address another interesting question that popped up while I was looking through discussion surrounding this film, and that is... I mean, short answer, yes, if you're judging it as a movie. I mentioned this earlier, but just because a film's message is good doesn't automatically make it a quality film. But it is worth pointing out that with Don't Look Up being one of the most watched Netflix films around the world, actually becoming the platform's second biggest debut of all time, millions of viewers across the globe are likely engaging with climate change discourse as a result. For better or for worse, perhaps, but at least it gets conversations started. For a subject matter that, as McKay and his team have so bluntly expressed, isn't discussed enough. But for a medium like film with such an ability to communicate new ideas and challenge pre-existing notions, it's bound to touch or influence audiences more through well-executed stories that also pose good ideas, rather than a story with good ideas that's executed quite poorly. And the thing is, there are better movies out there that have also attempted to highlight the dire consequences of climate change. Movies like Brad Bird's WALL-E and its uplifting environmental message, Darren Aronofsky's Mother and the way it uses horror to depict the consequences of humanity's greed, and Bong Joon-ho's Snowpiercer, which addresses both issues of social inequality as well as a tumultuous picture of the world undergoing climate disaster. Each of these films are proof that you can shine light on relevant issues and spark discussion while having incredibly creative and thought-provoking stories to tell. Important films often grant us new ideas on a subject, but they shouldn't have to hold your hand and spoon-feed them to you. The best philosophical messages that tend to stick are inspired by their mediums, by encouraging you to think rather than doing that for you. Watching Don't Look Up reminded me of when I tried out the 2019 Jordan Peele reboot of The Twilight Zone. Agreeable sentiments with skin-deep and hollow execution, especially compared to the plenty other creative attempts that have succeeded at the same goal. But look, I want to be fair, this isn't to say McKay failed on all accounts. I mentioned a few allegories I did like, and the absurdity of the impact deniers made for a few laughs, and I gotta give it to that running joke with the snacks. I gotta admit that was probably the most amusing gag they had. I also like their actual grounded moments of humanity towards the end of the film, particularly as our leads sit around a dinner table for their last meal, reflecting upon all the things they were grateful for on Earth while it lasted. And to top it off, it does excel at being a monument to anger and frustration, as this one article puts it. There's no doubt about that. It is absolutely understandable how environmental scientists and climate activists would warm to this film. It captures the struggle of their movement well, the fact that such overwhelming, dire issues are often swept under the rug or met with indifference by those with the power to make a difference. I mean, just as some climate experts have pointed out McKay's broken metaphor for the climate crisis, plenty have also come forward to commend the film for having captured the blunt exasperation they often feel at having their facts and warnings ignored. One by the name of Nina Lakhani even mentions the portrayal of J-Law's Kate DiBiase and how her expertise being sidelined by her image as an unhinged, hysterical woman will resonate with plenty other female climate scientists and activists in her field. And with scientists literally getting arrested for holding peaceful climate change protests in recent months, I might add, perhaps the cathartic rage expressed by this film is not only justified, but is more relevant than ever. Evidently, it's still struck a chord with plenty of people, even those beyond the realm of science or activism, regardless of the many critical gripes surrounding it, mine included. And if you came away from this movie with that experience, then that is awesome. I'm definitely not saying it is the worst film I've seen in recent times, nor is it the worst attempt at social commentary, but with all its potential, all the scientific insight and research and social discourse at its disposal, it ultimately could have done so much better. Simply excelling at being a sounding board for one's disappointment and rage, however cathartic, won't have the same eye-opening impact as satirical comedies that attempt to explore beyond the surface. The ones that effectively push for action, or at least have the drive to help us understand these issues better. And of course, better jokes. So that about does it for my review / analysis of Don't Look Up and how it holds up as the latest Adam McKay comedy on important issues. Of course, I'd love to know what you guys think. If you agree or disagree, let me know in the comments. And let me know what your favorite satirical comedy is, whether it's a TV show or a movie. I think it would actually be Succession and The Other Guys for me. I've been trying to find an excuse for the longest time to talk about either of these on this channel, so I'm glad I was able to briefly cover both for this video. And I've also recently watched this really good indie black comedy called The Art of Self-Defense, starring Jesse Eisenberg. Go watch it, I'm not gonna say much about it, but it's hilarious and topical in that bizarre, dry humor kind of way. As always, thanks for watching till the end of this long-winded ramble of mine, and I apologize for the inconsistent lighting. I know it has been tragic, but Sydney weather has been incredibly unpredictable lately, and the cockatoos are relentless. Don't forget that you can use my code AnnaIsabel in my description to get 10% off established titles and make you or a loved one a lord or lady today. Plus, help plant a tree with your order, since the world could use more of those in these recent times. If you enjoy pop culture video essays and commentaries like this one, go ahead and like and subscribe and hit that notification bell, all the awkward YouTube outro stuff. And I'll catch you guys in the next one.